just a few moments here on sort of the impetus of, or the genesis of this meeting and this series of meetings. And then I'm going to hand the things over to Tiffany from Circle Up Education, who is helping us navigate this process. So this conversation was really highlighted or pushed to the forefront by the death of George Floyd, but our community and members of our council had already been recognizing the need to look at our institutions and our policies, our policing, and all aspects of what we do in relation to fairness, social and racial equity, and the fostering of a full spectrum community here in St. Helena. We recognize here that Black Lives Matter, that racial equity is a critical local concern in St. Helena and Napa County, and our participation in positive action was necessary. I want to take a moment to recognize that we here are on the lands that the first peoples here were the Anasazi, the Pomo, the Miwok, and the Putwin. I'm pleased to see that we have folks listening in from our community, but also some from outside the community. My hope is that our town can take great pride in this work, that within the next 6 months, we can be recognized. We can be recognized at the forefront of this conversation in the Bay Area. It's a conversation that is a challenging conversation that affects us personally. It affects us in how we work with each other and work together as a community. As we get started, I just want to take a moment to recognize that our current police force and police administration they've taken a lead in ensuring that our policies and practices evolve to be at the forefront of best practice, that there's always more we can do, but that our current police department and administration, with them, I feel confident that we have proactive and engaged partners committed to this work. It's community work. And I want to recognize that their roles of the women and men in our police department at the front line of our emergency services. And they play a key role in our public safety here in the community. They're a part of this community. We want to work together, and we feel that with our department, we have willing and engaged participation. So with that, I'm going to take a moment. I'm going to hand this to Tiffany to sort of take us into the next stage of this discussion and as we move towards action.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mayor Ellsworth. Good evening, everybody. The City of St. Helena. My name is Tiffany Hong. I am the co-founder at Circle Up Education, and I am very honored and excited to be your moderator and facilitator for tonight's community roundtable on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so we have a very exciting evening planned out for lots of discussion and sharing. I am going to go ahead and share my screen to give you an overview of what we will be discussing today. So to begin, we are going to be starting off with some welcome introductions like we just had. We'll be doing some introductions of our panelists, of our city council, of our staff who will be on this call. I will be sharing a brief overview of bias and discrimination. So we have a common language to be able to enter this conversation together. And then we'll open it up to some community conversation for you all to share your stories, your experiences, your suggestions around experiencing bias and discrimination related to a number of different social identities, to share your contributions of what you think the city is doing well, and also what more can it do to create a more inclusive city and community environment. And then from there, we will go into our closing. And so, like I mentioned, my name is Tiffany Hong. I am the co-founder at Circle Up Education. We are an Oakland-based social enterprise, which means we are an organization with a social mission. We work with schools, cities, nonprofits around anti-discrimination, relationship building, conflict resolution, and also restorative justice. And so our agenda for today is we're not going to take too much time, but we're going to start with doing some introductions, an overview of bias and discrimination, and then the rest of the time will be contributed to the community conversation. And so I would like to start by introducing our city council members. So you all are familiar with who will be on the call listening to your stories and experiences today. So I'll call out each city council member. If you all just want to share your name, say hellos, and perhaps what you hope to get out of the listening session today. Just a brief sentence, and we'll go around the room. And let's start with Anna Shuto.
Hi, thank you. I'm Anna Shuto, and I hope to get tonight out. I hope to learn more about what we do next and how we become more of the community that I know we all want to have here that's more inclusive.
Thank you, Anna. And next, Mary Koberstein.
Hello, I'm Mary Koberstein. I mostly want to listen tonight and hear what people have to say. I think one thing we could try to get out of this is an understanding of issues that the city government is best equipped to address versus issues where some of our community partners might play more of a lead role.
Thank you, Mary. And then last we have David Nudsen.
Yeah, hi. Actually, it's pronounced Knudsen.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm here to listen as well, just like Ms. Koberstein. And one of the things that I found fascinating that I've learned over the fall in walking pretty much the entire town as part of the campaigning season is that we have a lot of housing that is substandard. And I don't think I actually realized that. And I'm sure there's characteristics to that that we need to address, and I want to be part of the solution if I can be. Thank you.
Thank you, David. All right, and then we will go to our introductions next with Vice Mayor Doring. If you'd like to share yourself today, what you hope to get out of today's session, and anything else you bring to the conversation.
Thank you, Tiffany. Yes, I'm Paul Doring, my Vice Mayor of St. Helena. I'm married to Kara. I had 2 children who are young adults now. In thinking about and getting prepared for this meeting, I was trying to come up with sort of a sense, try to crystallize and synthesize for me a very complex subject matter. And what I kept coming back to, and it probably derives from my younger years, is this. It seems to me that we all have a sense that we need to belong. The sense of belonging is so critical as human beings. And for me personally, to personalize it just for a minute, I don't want to take a whole lot of time, is, I recognize that in myself as a little boy, growing up and facing poverty, lack of education, born into a family of drug addiction and alcoholism, and all those things, having my Mexican grandmother taken from me, murdered, losing my father to drug addiction. What I found is that people will not hesitate to assign certain values to you or certain traits to you, even if you don't want those traits. And those assignments devalue you and dehumanize you. And really they work against that sense of belonging. And so I'm offering that only because I want other folks to feel welcome to offer that themselves if they have those similar stories. Because even now, at this stage in my life, with all the education and professional background and being married and happy and all the successes I've had, I still come back to that sense of struggle. Do I belong here? Do I belong even on this panel? Do I belong with my fellow council members? Do I belong to the legal profession? Do I belong in St. Helena? And so what I hope to get out of it is sort of trying to break down some of those roadblocks to belonging and to creating pathways to empathy and understanding, not only on a personal level, but on a city level in terms of our policies and procedures. And so that's what I want to do. I hope to listen, hope for people to participate. Thank you all who are on the call. Thank you for your participation.
Thank you so much, Vice Mayor Doring, for sharing your personal story and experience with us. And I think you captured it beautifully in the sense of we're all seeking belonging. Sometimes we don't even realize that we don't feel that. And a lot of that can be preceded by perceptions, assumptions, feelings of exclusion. And some of these perceptions perceive us, but they affect us in a really real and personal way. And, it sounds really simple, but sometimes it is a big part of this is around empathy building. And I'm happy that this is what we're going to be doing today through being able to hear specific stories and experiences from our city residents and members. And our last introduction by Mayor Ellsworth.
Thank you. The reason, well, there are many reasons. It's a difficult conversation for a community, for all of us. It's emotional, it's economic, and it's also ties into our family histories and heritages. It's a challenging conversation. It's important to me personally here now because this was the town that I grew up in and learned about fairness, equality, and democracy. And I've been under the impression, or was under the impression, that all of us who grew up here together were on the same track. Somehow over time, both here and other places I've been, realizing that that is not the case, that we have not all been on the same track due to systemic issues of bias and racism. Systemic institutionalized bias and racism. It's a challenging concept, and that is something that I really hope comes from this meeting and this series of meetings that we're going to do as we talk about. It's a series of waves rather than one tsunami coming through. We want this conversation to continue and grow. And it's going to take some education. On October 22nd, we passed a resolution that recognized systemic racism and bias as a public health crisis. We also recognized action measures we could take. And that is what this meeting is, and these series of meetings are here to push forward. What I recognized is that how could I hold myself up to the ideals that I grew up with here if I didn't do all I could to help realize those ideals for everyone around me, and not just myself. So that is why this is so, to me personally, important. But I want to just take a moment to read the beginning of the staff report from October 2nd. I think it's beautifully written, comprehensively written. I know that our city manager and our assistant to the city manager worked on putting this together. And I just want to read the first part of it because I think it captures this well. Racial and social justice issues are at the forefront of the country following the violent murder of George Floyd and countless others that have impacted marginalized communities, including Black, Indigenous, people of color, and our LGBTQ plus members of our community. And I think it's important to say that we're all members of the same community. We're not separate communities. We're all the same community, and we're all members of the same community. And we have folks that have been marginalized and impacted, and it's time that this needs to be recognized. And that part there was mine, but I'll move back to the staff report. That little bit there. Discrimination, including systemic institutional racism, manifest in distinct ways across many social intersections, including race, gender expression, gender identity, sexual orientation, class, disability, immigration status, and age, and collectively reinforce the divides within the country and communities and have an impact on the quality of life and access to services and resources for those impacted. And so I'll leave it at that. And I want to recognize what Councilperson Koberstein said. It's identifying what we can do as a council and finding where our strengths are, and also helping others recognize where theirs are. So I will leave it at that, but I just want to, continue pushing forward, that this is the beginning of a conversation that would become, in my hope, we will be leading this conversation.
Thank you, Mayor Ellsworth. And you bring up really, really deep and insightful points about the ways in which racism, discrimination, all of the social identities, right, around gender identity and expression, race, sexual orientation, ability, language, or perceive thereof, all of that comes into play, and really thinking about starting from the personal experiences, but then how do we each contribute to reinforcing these systems or this exclusion without even realizing it? So starting that unpacking process, that learning and unlearning tonight. And so before we begin with our overview of bias and discrimination, I also wanted to introduce our other staff members who are also on the screen. We have our city manager, Mark Presswich, if you want to say hello.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you.
And we also have Priya Nixon.
Good evening. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here.
And then we also have Cindy, our city clerk, and also 2 of our Spanish interpreters for this evening, who will continue to help and provide technical assistance this evening. And so before we begin our community conversation, I wanted to start by giving everybody on the call here today an overview of what we mean when we talk about bias and discrimination. Because I think as a city, we're all here because we want to improve, create a more of a sense of belonging and inclusion, to remove, reduce, dismantle systemic racism and discrimination. And so recognizing that we're all here with good intentions, but sometimes we may not realize how discrimination occurs, because it can be both implicit and explicit, and it takes many different forms. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to give you a brief overview. We provide, in our organization, we provide coaching to different cities. And sometimes, they bring up questions and they're like, Tiffany, somebody came to me one day and it was an IT director, and she came to me and she was like, I think I experienced discrimination. And she was sharing this with the city manager. And after the city manager heard this story, she was like, it didn't seem like what happened was discrimination, because essentially an employee had come into the office to request to speak to the IT director. And when she opened the door, he was surprised. And he said, I was looking for the IT director. And she was like, that's me. And he said, oh, you're not who I was expecting. And so that brief moment of shock and surprise, right? This IT director experienced that as a sense of exclusion and discrimination, but also when we dug deeper into it, we were like, was that intentional or not? And so when I was talking to the city manager about this incident, I was like, there's a lot of different types of discrimination, and maybe that's what we need to clarify. And so when we talk about discrimination, we talk about 2 different forms, which is implicit and explicit. And to explain this concept, I use, this is the axis of discrimination, which helps us to understand the relationship between bias and discrimination, and ways in which it can be conscious and unconscious. And so if we take a look at the axis here, the top half, this orange area, is the conscious realm. So these are all of the things that we know exist, our thoughts, our beliefs, we know are there. And then the bottom half, this blue area, is the unconscious realm. So these are things that are outside of our awareness that can be conflicting to our overall thoughts or beliefs, but we don't see it. And then on the right side of the axis of discrimination, on this left side here is bias. This green area. And bias is our thoughts and our beliefs, our opinions, our values. These are things we think or feel in our hearts or minds, but they're not tangible. Whereas the right side is discrimination, which is our actions or behaviors, right? And so we have bias that can be conscious. Like I think that People can have conscious bias or beliefs, and then what happens is they take action on them. And when they do, that creates discrimination. So I can say, for instance, I don't like women, or I don't like Black people. I have a conscious belief. I say it, I believe it, and then I take action. I treat Black people or Asian people worse than me. I create hostile environments. That's conscious and explicit forms of bias and discrimination. We don't see it as often, but it's there. And we hear about some of these really, really jarring, threatening, scary incidences. But what is also more commonplace is our unconscious or implicit biases and discrimination. And so what happens here is that we have implicit biases, and that means I have thoughts or beliefs that I'm not aware of that oftentimes contradict with my explicit beliefs. So I might think and say, I think men and women and all genders are equal and capable and intelligent, yet my unconscious beliefs based on what I've seen in the media or on TV, because I only see white males in leadership positions on TV, I may have an implicit bias that men are just better leaders. And so without realizing that I have this bias, I can also take unconscious, unintentional discrimination, which is, even though I say men and women are equal, my actions might not demonstrate that. Or my statements or behaviors, or might have some of those blind spots, which we also call microaggressions, unconscious and unintentional forms of discrimination. And so the thing about the implicit biases is that usually they are hidden beneath our positive self-perceptions, which means I think I'm a good person. I feel like I'm a good person, yet I have these biases and I don't realize that I cause harm. And so the thing that both the conscious and unconscious forms of discrimination have in common is that they bring up very, very different feelings and emotions, but they both cause harm. Whether we intend to or not, it's when a lot of people talk about intent versus impact. I didn't mean to cause harm, but still we have to look at the impact of it. And so to take this a step further is that these are some of the ways that bias and discrimination occur interpersonally between people or in our minds or in the individual level. But when we don't realize that we have these biases, they can contribute to, like we just talked about, discrimination between people. That's interpersonal forms of discrimination. They can also begin to affect us internally in creating internalized discrimination. It says racism here, but we can be talking about any aspect of our social identities. It could be producing sexism or transphobia or ableism, any of the isms. And internalized discrimination is when I start to believe the different stereotypes that people have about people within my social identities. Stereotypes about women, about being Asian, about being first generation. And I start to believe those things about myself, whether it's positive or negative. And the area I think that affects a lot of cities that we're trying to look at now is the ways in which discrimination can be structural. You'll also hear the terms institutionalized discrimination as well as systemic racism. And so in talking about this example, right, is that discrimination becomes structural when people in positions of power, like in our city government, in schools, wherever it is, in the workplace, when people have biases, whether they realize it or not, and they incorporate their biases into creating rules and policies that leave a lasting impact on the community and future generations. An example is one of the cities that we work with. We had a similar town hall conversation, and community members got to share different stories around bias and racism and discrimination. And something that was uncovered was we found that in some of the titles, the CCNRs of homeowners, that they actually found in the contracts that it actually said, and these were, contracts from, the 40s and 50s, but it actually explicitly said in there, you're not allowed to buy or sell your home to anybody who is not white. So we prohibit the selling of homes to people who are Black or African American, Asian, Indian. And so that was a law that was put into a policy. And so today, the city that we were working with, they're majority a white community. And so you think about how our current situation has been intentionally created and then unintentionally maintained through something as far back and just a small part, but this rule or policy around not being able to sell homes to anybody who's not white, which then impacts who enters the community, who gets to be a part of it, the types of schools, the exposure to diversity that students get. And there's a rippling impact, and not to mention the unconscious biases that become woven in. And we see these in a lot of different areas too. I mean, where I live right now in Oakland, there's a lot of history around the freeways and how decisions were made around city planning to intentionally separate different communities and then the impact that it had. But that's a long, long history session, which we're not going to be going into today. But I at least wanted to share with you all the ways in which these forms of discrimination interact with each other. And they are all glued together through privilege and power, which means it's people who recreate these systems, who maintain them, reinforce them, or dismantle them. But part of dismantling them is becoming more aware of where they exist, which is what we're here to do today. And so for the rest of our evening today, we would like to invite the community, the city of St. Helena, to this roundtable community conversation to be able to share your experiences, your stories, your suggestions on the state of the city of St. Helena around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so we're going to be inviting your responses to 3 general questions. The first is for you to just come onto the screen and share a story about a time you've witnessed or experienced bias or discrimination in the city of St. Helena, whether that's living here, working here, visiting here, and around any type of social identity, whether that's based on your gender that you experience discrimination, your age, your sexual orientation, your race, the language that you speak or having an accent, any aspect of who you are. We'd also like to hear from you what is working in regards to the city's efforts to be more inclusive and to address and dismantle interpersonal and structural discrimination. So what have you seen? What have you seen in terms of the city's efforts around what it's done, what it's tried in its recent efforts, or even in the past, so that we can know what to continue doing and sustain. And then the last question is, what more can the city do to be more inclusive, to address or dismantle interpersonal and structural bias and discrimination? So based on what you've seen or experienced, what else can the city do or consider or think about as it moves forward in these next steps? In these series of conversations and steps to become a more diverse, inclusive, and equitable community. And so to have this conversation, like the panelists mentioned, is that everybody on the panel is here to listen. And we are going to open it up to comments. We're going to take one speaker at a time. And in order to speak, if you'd like to express that you want to speak, you can raise your hand. There's a raise hand button in the, if you're on a computer or a cell phone, there should be a raise hand button. And if you would like to raise your hand and you are on the screen, on the phone, I think Ms. Nixon, Priya, you will go ahead and share that logistical information in a moment. And then in terms of sharing, we're going to have between 2 to 4 minutes to share, depending on how many people express interest. We'll start with 4, but if there are more people who would like to share, I might recommend once we ask for the raise of hands, if there's 15, 20 people, I might share that we're going to limit it to 2 minutes or 3 minutes. But we'll have double the time for those who will be providing interpretation for. When there's 30 seconds remaining, I will mindfully interrupt you or gently interrupt you. And the comments are being recorded as this webinar is being recorded, and I'll also be taking notes so that the city can process all of the information that you shared today. And when you are moved to the panelist, we welcome you to turn on your camera so we can meet you virtually. But if you don't feel comfortable with that or you're dialing in, that's completely okay. We're just happy that you are here to share. All right. Other than that, I just want to say that for our session today in sharing our stories, we want to keep it a brave and safe space, which means I invite you all to bring your courage, your curiosity. Please refrain from talking personally about a person or a business, because we don't want to create a space of public shaming or calling people out, but we want to hear your stories and experiences. And then again, we invite you to be here to listen openly and with curiosity, because there might be things people share that you've never experienced before that may be hard to believe. And so we want to be open and hold that space. All right, so if you are interested in sharing, I invite you all now to raise your hand. And then Priya, will you remind us how we raise our hand if we're calling in?
Yes, thank you so much, Tiffany. I'm going to share my screen really quick just so that folks see this. So if you would like to call in only, you'll dial 669-900-6833, and then you'll enter 834-0404-5779, and then you will press *9. And this information is also posted on the city's website on the agenda. So that's another place where you can find that information. So thank you, Tiffany. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. There you go.
Thank you, Priya. Great. And after everybody shares, I will, since the panel will not be responding today, I will make sure to capture your thoughts. I might repeat it back to you and paraphrase just to make sure we captured everything that you expressed. So let's go ahead and we'll, city staff will help to transfer us over, if you raise your hand, onto the panel. So to start, we have Doug Bostian, but please correct me if I did not pronounce your name correctly.
That's correct. Can you hear me okay?
Yep. Hi, Doug. Welcome.
Hi. Thanks very much. I want to say I'm very proud of the city for engaging in this effort. Thank you for your efforts. I'll keep my comments really short. I'm a winery owner and a manager here in St. Helena. I have a great team of mostly Hispanic team members. And I guess I have a comment and then a question. My comment is I would love to see more Hispanic people of Hispanic background in leadership positions within the city. And then the question is there anything that the city can do to help that, to recruit, to encourage, to educate on a long-term basis to try to move towards more obvious leadership down the road? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Doug. So what I heard you say is that you would, that you're a winery owner. You have a lot of team members who have a Hispanic or Latinx background. You would love to see more Hispanic people in leadership positions in the city, and really curious about the city's efforts on what it is doing or what more it can do in terms of recruiting, encouraging, educating, maybe even creating pathways or pipelines to have more Hispanic representation in leadership positions. Thank you so much, Doug. All right, so if you would like to share, please feel free to raise your hand. I will call on you and then you will be transferred over onto our panel. Next up, we have Alicia Summer.
Hi. Hi. Thanks again to the city for creating this space for all of us to be in conversation like this. I was a part of a conversation with Mark and Priya a couple of weeks ago And Norma, who's another community member, mentioned that people who may be immigrants or non-native English speakers often have difficulty seeking out services and help because of fear that they, could get in trouble, if they are undocumented or have family members that are undocumented, which also made me think about our police force and how they interact with the community. And I would just also like to know, moving forward, what the police department is also doing in order to build relationships with its community members so that everybody does feel safe being able to address concerns.
Thank you, Alicia. So what I heard you say was in some of the other listening sessions. Oh, and will you also tell us your relationship to the city?
We work in wine. We work for a winery here in town, Wheeler Farms. We just moved here in August from the East Bay area. So still kind of new to the city. We also have 3 young children. And of course, as people who are parenting children of color, also curious about making sure that they have feel safe and comfortable approaching law enforcement or other people in leadership positions around the town.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Alicia. Yeah, so what I heard you say was in being part of some of these listening sessions, hearing people who may be immigrants or non-English, native English speakers experiencing maybe not discrimination, but difficulty or fear seeking help because of what the bias or perception might be around them being undocumented. And the curiosity around what type of training or what are the philosophies that the police department has around engaging with the community to, start to dispel some of those fears or proactively relieve them or reduce them. Yeah, thank you both. All right, so next we have Norma Fariz. Let me know if I pronounced your name correctly. And as you all come on, please introduce yourselves, your name, your relationship to the city. Are you a business owner, a resident? And then go ahead and share your comments. All right, Norma, welcome. Oh, Norma, will you unmute?
I am the Norma that Alicia referred to. So hello. I was also a participant of the small sessions. I want to say to your question of what is working, the city is funding the interpreters on all these public meetings. That is putting your money to saying what you do. I mean, you have these efforts of listening. The city had a multicultural committee before, so trying to revive that somehow. The library, investing in the library, that is a great equalizer, and that's another way that the city is doing good. The city has also offered scholarships in the recreation department, so that's also being good. The city supports nonprofit organizations. I work at the family center who has gained the trust of the Latino population. So the city supporting us, it's a way of also supporting inclusion. What else I see that things can be done is we in the listening sessions, we talk knowledge is power. So somehow continue strengthening the library and having a full-time bilingual staff there, more full-time bilinguals. Then also, as Alicia said, well, people are fearful of coming, but it's also really intimidating and fear and difficult to come and speak in public in a city session if English is not your first language. So somehow we need more training. A lot of people need training on civic engagement and how to be brave and just say, even if you don't speak perfect English, just come and say what you think. So have those sessions on training. Have more support on the rec department to offer scholarships and different timings of events, just like the city did very well in the listening sessions on the small groups. They offer a morning, a midday, and a night session to increase participation. Also the city staff, and yeah, actively recruiting more diverse staff and really making an effort on that. And what Alicia talked a little bit, I don't know if we are a sanctuary city or what that implies, but I know San Francisco, I think it's a sanctuary city, and that gives people more like peace of mind. That's it. Thank you very much for all your efforts. Really, the city's great.
Thank you, Norma. Thank you so much for all of the feedback and suggestions. So around what is working, you had quite a bit to list, which is great to hear around the city funding interpreters, like backing, what it's saying with its money, which is true, like how do we make this inclusive and accessible to people? The efforts around listening, reviving, or the multicultural committee that it had, the library and investing in the library as a resource, offering scholarships, and then supporting nonprofit organizations in the work that it's doing. Around what more can be done is definitely around continuing to strengthen the library, having more bilingual staff, so it is more of a welcoming environment, and more full-time bilingual staff. And then maybe some support around how to slowly shift the culture, make it more encouraging for people who are not native English speakers to feel comfortable sharing on a panel like this, because it is not easy, and it is very intimidating. And, when you said we don't speak perfect English, part of me was like, what is perfect English anyway? Maybe we should reframe that. And then continuing to offer these events in different times to make it accessible for people with different schedules. And like what other folks have said around recruitment of more diverse staff. Thank you, Norma.
And the sanctuary city.
Sanctuary City, yes, absolutely. It went over to the second page for me. Sanctuary City, yes. All right, and next up we have Lilia Hain. Let me know if please correct me in your pronunciation if I pronounced that wrong. Hi, Lilia.
Hi, my name is Lilia Hine.
Lilia Hine, thank you.
Thank you, Tiffany. My pronouns are she, her, and Aya. I'm here tonight as an early childhood educator that works for our County Office of Ed, and the parent of a non-binary child. I wanted to share a quick story of discrimination that I faced as a parent of a gender creative child. As my oldest was transitioning from a preschool setting to kindergarten, my oldest is super creative and likes to be very expressive, especially with clothing. And traditionally, clothing marketed to girls seem to be what they favor wearing. And school staff actually spoke with us about having my child wear basketball shorts on top of their girl leggings to appear more sporty, and in hopes of, being more socially accepted. And so that, and being an educator, really kind of got my gears turning on how can we create an environment in our classrooms, in our educational settings that is accepting to everyone. And so that has been a big motivator for me this year. And working for the County Office of Ed, something that's going well is that the early childhood services have been receiving anti-bias education trainings, as well as materials supplied to their classrooms to promote, diverse books and curriculum ideas, things like that. So I really appreciate that. A lot of the centers in St. Helena and Napa, American Canyon, Calistoga will be receiving these through the First 5 Rainbow Action Network assistance, which it's so exciting. And so I just hope that through these conversations and the continued work that the city does, that we keep in mind how can we create these wonderfully safe and inclusive spaces for children in our educational settings.
Thank you so much, Lilia. Did I say it right?
Lilia, close.
Lilia. Okay. Thank you, Lilia, about sharing your story about one of your child and being a gender creative child and the types of like boxes that they were put in like from such a young age and like the rejection and having to have that experience and to hear about all of the great work that you've been doing in the County Office of Ed to advocate for more learning around this, right? Like how gender is not just two boxes, that there's many, and how that is expressed is in a lot of different ways. And that with early childhood services, that they're receiving anti-bias training, materials to promote a more diverse classroom and culture and environment. And all of this is being funded and supported through First Five and other organizations.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Lilia. All right, and next we have Mr. McLean. Hey, Mr. McLean, go ahead and unmute when you're ready.
Hi there, this is Malcolm McLean. Let me turn my light on for a second. There we go. It's a little bit better.
Yeah, all right, Malcolm, your name, your relationship to the city, and anything you ready to share.
Yeah, my name is Malcolm McLean, and I'm an 8th grade science teacher actually at the middle school in St. Helena. I also grew up in St. Helena. Actually, I moved to St. Helena when I was a freshman in high school. So it was interesting hearing about stories. You know, I moved to St. Helena from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. My dad's side of the family is all Black, and we moved here when I was 14. And my side of the family here in California is all white. So I got to sort of experience both worlds. And so it was interesting when I came as a freshman, there was a English teacher, Peter Ainsley, and he'd talk about stories about, you know, St. Helena back in the day, and you talk about the history of St. Helena. And he moved to St. Helena in the 60s, and he actually taught my mom, and he talked about how, like, when he moved there, he said, you know, we don't have, he went to this cocktail party or whatever, and at the cocktail party, the people there said, you know, we don't have any problems with Black people. We love Black people here in St. Helena. But then he said to them, well, there aren't any Black people here. So it was just interesting, like, you know, we don't recognize our own biases, you know, until like we're like confronted with people around us who are different than we are. And speaking of what Jeff talked about, you know, he went to St. Helena High School as well. You know, it was a community where everybody really, you know, supported each other and helped each other. But like you said, underlying all of that, there's always bias, and we're all biased. I'm biased, you're biased. And in a teaching realm, you know, it's interesting too, in hearing from like parents and educators and other people, you know, sometimes you hear people say things like, I'm colorblind and things like that. And that, you know, I think that, like that graphic you had at the beginning really helped us really understand like the fact that there is implicit bias. We all have it. And it comes from not because we're bad people, but it comes from, like you were saying, what we see in society. And in St. Helena, we only see one view of the world. And I talk to my students about this, and I talk about like, we see this one way, and, you know, imagine like you go someplace else, you might see things a different way. So I'm really excited about the fact that this is even happening. And I know like the city is going to be partnering with the schools as well. And I think I just want everybody to know that it's going to be hard work, and it's going to be up to, honestly, the people in St. Helena who kind of have the power to make the changes, because the people who are being affected in these ways, based on like stereotypes and bias and things like that, they don't necessarily have the power to make those changes happen. It really is going to have to come from all of us, and you've got to stick to it. You got to do the hard work, because the people who are being impacted, they don't get a break. They don't get some time off. And so, and that'll be the hard part. That said, I'm really excited that this is even happening, and I really appreciate you all taking the time to do this.
Thank you so much, Malcolm, for sharing that history and that experience from like, you know, moving from Milwaukee to St. Helena, and like your experience with like two different sides of the family in two different parts of the country, and being Black and being white, and then seeing the differences And that kind of like moment or that story that your teacher had shared about like, oh yeah, we love Black people and we appreciate them, but then looking around to see that lack of diversity and how the city of St. Helena does feel very homogenous, and like how does that root back to different types of interpersonal or systemic or invisible biases that we have, and the appreciation that this work or this conversation is happening, because that's huge, right? Like it wasn't like nobody was talking about it in this much of a public way until recently, and the recognition that it is going to be hard. And I appreciate the advice that you're giving to our city council, right? These people in power, in that this is going to be heavy lifting. And the people who have experienced bias and discrimination, especially historically, have been marginalized, like are exhausted. And we don't want to depend on them constantly to be teaching or showing up in this way. Like we also have to do our own level of learning and unlearning. But I really appreciate the kudos and all of the excitement and enthusiasm that you're bringing to this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks for all you're doing with the students.
You're welcome.
Yeah. All right. And next up, we have Amy Zuniga. I hope, please, anybody feel free to correct me on your name pronunciations. And I'm going to make the time limit at 3 minutes because I see about 6 people with their hands up right now.
Hi, Tiffany. Thanks. I'm Amy Denny Zuniga. I've lived in St. Helena for, I guess, 4.5 years now. I'm the rector of Grace Episcopal Church right downtown. That's the senior pastor there. And we've been doing a lot of work on racial reconciliation in the church context for a while. And it's, I think what you previously said, reiterating Mr. McLean's comments about folks that are raised as white or identify as white, doing our own work is really, really crucial. So part of that work for me has been doing some historical study of the history of race in the Napa Valley. That's particularly of interest to me because I had some ancestors that settled here in the 1800s. And so I've come to know a fair amount about the very difficult history of race here in the Napa Valley. And I see that reflected now everywhere I go. I see it in the huge disparities in our community. I see it in the fact of who's here and who's not, how the incredible success and wealth of this community that's grown, literally grown here, has been shared or hasn't. And so when I walk around, like one of our council members was mentioning, and see that disparity in folks that I know, I see that history reflected. And I see a really big gap in our community as well. I moved here from a community that was 60% Latino and 20% first generation immigrants. So very similar, like kind of biracial community, but majority Latino, and a large segment of folks who've been immigrated to this country, like 2nd, 3rd, 4th generation, like my husband's family. So that created a very different sort of a feel of a community. And I walked here and I was like, whoa, there's this really kind of a bifurcation that I experienced. So that in terms of witnessing, that would be the other piece that I would say. What's working is I think there's really, really good intention. I think this forum is an example of that. People really do want to bridge that gap. They want to understand, they see the divides, they want to find ways to make it better. And I want to echo what my friend Norma said, that the library is one of the best places that you see that happen. It's just really, really beautiful. I think our schools do a good job as well. There's some room for improvement there in our public schools, but they'd make a real effort. And I have to say, during this time of distance learning, I've seen that stepped up even more. I would have thought that would have been a greater divider, and in some ways it has been, but the effort has been huge to kind of help everybody come along in this really difficult time. And in terms of suggestions and what could work in the future, I have 2 kind of concrete suggestions. One would be that we do our own work, our history work as a community. I mean, one just really simple suggestion is I would love to see a plaque where St. Helena's Chinatown was, because we had a Chinatown here. We had a huge population of immigrant workers from China that were literally driven out of the community. And I think for us, I mean, it doesn't seem like a great touristy thing to do, right? But I think it's an important part of us owning our history. And I think it's absolutely crucial to moving forward in a positive and equitable way. But there's lots of other things we can do with history to kind of begin to understand the impact, the ongoing impact that that has. We've been involved, some of us, with the Susquehanna Tribal Council's efforts on historical healing and trauma with the Native American population here in the Valley. And that's something I would really recommend to anybody that hasn't had a chance to go through those workshops. There's another set of those coming up. And then finally, I would just say finding ways to really promote and bring together our Latino business owners and leaders that we do have in the community, I think would be a really great step. Thanks so much again for doing this.
Thank you so much, Amy. Yeah, thank you for sharing what your experience has been in moving here to the city of St. Helena and really taking on this research to really understanding the city and the historical racism or discrimination that has existed, and then how you see it today. And it makes sense that now everywhere you look, like there's a story behind where we are today that we don't always connect the context to. And that you also shared around what is working is the good intention that the city has to really understand and unpack, to really understand the gap that exists in terms of the diversity. And you're encouraging us to all do our own history work to learn about the history of the city of St. Helena, and also a plaque where Chinatown was. Like even I'm learning right now as you're sharing some of this to honor and recognize and name ways in which the city has been a part of some of the structural discrimination. And other kudos to the library and the recommendation for anybody to join. Was it the tribal council that you said?
It's the Susquehanna Intertribal Council. Yeah, they have a series of workshops on the history of Native Americans in the Napa Valley and California in general, and it's really, really fruitful. To be
wonderful. Yeah, I just wrote that down so that we could share that widely later. Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, we have Rosara. Hi, Rosara, welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm looking for my camera, but I can't find it. But anyway, there you go. Here I am. Hi, how are you? This is great conversation. This is wonderful. And yeah, thank you for doing this. And I am so looking forward to working with the city and through this whole process, because like somebody has mentioned for so many times, there's a lot of history here. I was a member, I've been living in St. Helena since '72. So I grew up here, I raised my family here. I went through the school district. And I have a business that clients are essential workers. And when I say essential workers is the farm workers and people who work mostly in hospitality. So I know a lot of, the dilemmas that they go through. And speaking of that, I was a member of the multicultural committee that was very active, I want to say 7 years ago. And because of people came to Latinx people came to the multicultural committee and addressed their issues, and we would try to address them. The police chief was a member, mayor was a member, and so they listened firsthand as to what was going on. And because of that, the police department stopped profiling farm workers. They commute together. Sometimes there's 5 to a car, sometimes even 6 if they go to the same vineyard. They don't have the best of cars. They have very, and they were getting stopped for a broken tail light or a front light or whatever, and they were being ticketed. And because of the multicultural committee that stopped, and I hope that the city continues to do so and and not profile them in that way. I was also the chair of the Migrant Farm Worker Housing Committee, which deals solely to the migrant farm worker. There's 3 farm worker centers established. And I'm mentioning this because the city owns, the county owns the 3 centers that exist now. And so it behooves the county to protect those farm worker centers, meaning that, you know, we do a lot of education with the people who live there in regards to drive safely, try to get insurance. Now you can get insurance, and they're wonderful places for where, you know, they learn English, they health fairs, sheriff. The sheriff is there, and so in a way they're protected, or they tell them how to protect themselves. Also, what Norma mentioned, sanctuary cities. I don't know that we are, but I think that because all of the efforts that the county has done, I want to say that the entire county is a sanctuary county. We don't see the raids that we used to see, and we are not handing people who've come through the legal system or are incarcerated because of what have you. They are not handed to immigration anymore, and the county does that. But it wouldn't be a bad idea for the city to look into that and try to, you know, especially if anybody. The housing is a big issue, and that's the greatest divide that the city has between, you know, the community. I'm hoping that in some way more affordable, I don't know what we call it, affordable, low income, farm worker, or workforce housing is seriously look into and try to house the people who work at that gentleman's winery, you know? Yes. So, yeah, thank you. Like I said, I'm really looking forward to working on these issues. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your share and for highlighting all of the resources that exist that, you know, other people in the community may not know about, and also all of your activism in your time here with the city of St. Helena, from being involved in the multicultural committee to the work that you're doing right now in supporting essential workers as your clients and understanding the struggles and challenges that they go through. Being on the chair of the Migrant Farm Worker Committee and the centers that currently are providing support, and you know, putting that on our radar so we can continue to support them through the county.
Thank you. Can I make an observation?
Sure.
I am beyond excited about having bilingual translation in the meetings, but I know that I did that a while back when I was, well, anyway, and doing simultaneous translation is very difficult. And so, I don't know, this is something to think in the future. And you get brain dead and you try to keep up, and meetings goes by so fast that it's really hard to get the gist of the conversation that's going on, of the issues. And I think that there's room for a lot of frustration there. I think it's great, but I don't know, I hope that the council in the future thinks about having a meeting in Spanish, even if it's once every 2 months or what have you, where important issues could be clearly be addressed with you know, the community at large.
That's a great suggestion. Thank you, Rosaura. A great way to build empathy too, right? And sharing the struggle and the challenge of what it feels like to be having to hear two things at once. Even if the volumes are adjusted, you still don't get it in the same way.
Exactly.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah, and so I wrote down your notes around housing, considering affordable or workforce housing, whatever we want to call it, to make it accessible, and considering being a sanctuary city, or at least officially calling it, because it sounds like it's happening. Perfect. Thank you. All right, thank you, Rosara. And the next person we have, Norma, I see your hand is up again. And then after that will be Ana Carolina. Welcome back.
Sorry, yeah, I thought of something else. Well, what Rosaura said about housing, and also more opportunities to interact with different cultures. The Dia de los Muertos, Cinco de Mayo, the city already does some, but more. And I just read a really good book called Spirit Run from Noé Alvarez, and something that he highlights is the peace and dignity journey. That is a run that happens from Canada to Panama, and it goes through different places. And maybe St. Helena can think of hosting, along with a Sosco Intertribal Council, hosting one, while they're in the run, and doing they do healing ceremonies, and doing them in Wapo Park. So I just wanted you to know about that book and about that opportunity of the peace and dignity journeys. Thank you.
Thank you, Norma. I have Peace and Dignity Journey and the book called Spirit Run, and more opportunities for different cultures to learn and interact with each other. Thank you. All right. Next up, we have Ana Carolina. And you can correct my pronunciation. And are you there? Might be like a slight delay. There you are. Hi, Anna, welcome.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, how are you? Actually, I'm on Anna's because I forgot my laptop at work.
Okay, feel free to introduce yourself.
Oscar Deato's daughter. My name is Luis Hurtado, and I was born here in St. Helena, born and raised here in St. Helena, and I am a manager at Napa Wine Company in Oakville, California. So I just wanted to say a few facts, because earlier when we started the segment, you had said that you had encountered things when people came up and looking for the manager and such, that they always asked and they were like surprised that you were the one in charge or what have you. So I've had a few key positions throughout my working career here in St. Helena and here in the Valley, actually, where I have been in managerial positions. And I haven't encountered that. So I know how that feels. I could relate to that, where they were like, they wanted to talk to the manager. Yes, how can I help you? Oh, you're the manager. It's like totally surprised look on their face. Me being Mexican, Mexican heritage, they were very surprised. So I just wanted to just share that with you. And it's just, it falls into the graph that you showed earlier, the systematic racism or the bias that people have in their head is like, how could you be manager? It's like, but because I work hard and I'm honest and blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, they reward me. And I've been blessed to work for some very good people here in the Valley that see that. And that's why I'm promoted to those positions. And another thing I wanted to, the young lady that talked earlier about the police, I know that here in St. Helena Police, at the St. Helena Police Department, there's, I want to say three officers are Chicanos of Mexican heritage. I was wondering, we don't know who they are. I just seen them and I know who they are. I would think it would be a great idea if they would reach out to the community and introduce themselves. I know we had back a while back, we had an amazing officer named Ramon Jovel, and we all knew him as Officer Ramon. He was very well known here in the community, in the Latino, Chicano, Mexicano community here in St. Helena. But he made it a point to be known, and he presented himself, and he was very well known and respected. But he was only one person in the whole St. Helena police force that was like us, basically. But now I think we have maybe two. I want to say three. And who are they? Where are they? Let's get to know them. And I think we should put on the batteries like the Energizer Bunny and get them out here into the community to, you know, introduce themselves, because we have no clue who they are. We just seen them, we heard about them and everything. It's kind of like, you know, it's, but we don't know exactly who they are. So I think at this point, it would be a great, this community, maybe one or two should be involved in this forum. I think it would be a great idea. And that's just my thoughts. And like I said, it's just my thoughts. And I just wish everybody a great night and happy holidays. And we should just keep moving forward with all this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Luis. That was such a great share. Thank you for sharing your experience in being in managerial positions, that shock that people have of like, wait, what do you mean? Who are you looking for then? It's that implicit bias, right? People don't realize that they have that moment of like, wait, you weren't what I was expecting. Because in our minds, when we think about wine industry managers, there's a really particular image that comes to mind. And your image, you know, like your identity being Mexican or Chicano, like that doesn't fit that. And which is where it's almost a discrepancy, like, wait, that doesn't compute.
And the thing is, I mean, this whole thing is, we're nothing new here. We've been here forever.
Right.
And it's built on our backs. I mean, my past relatives and Ambro Savara's cousin, her father, my father, my Oscar de Aro's father, etc.
Wow.
And it goes back before that. And they, you know, they've been here in St. Helena, in Napa Valley, particularly in St. Helena, for a long time. And that's you know, that it's part of the history of why this valley is where it's at. And
right. Like you are the history, right? And then almost like to see how much, how hardwired those biases are, even though you all have been here and have been doing this work and built this city and town and community. I wrote down your notes about the Latino police officers too. Like, how can they build relationships with the community? We want to know.
Everybody, I mean, if you ask a lot of people here in Helena, a lot of the community, they remember Officer Ramon, because he was very involved and vocal, and it's been, you know.
Yeah, but that's a really tangible like suggestion we could take back to the police department, right? Yeah.
Thank you very much, and everybody have happy holidays.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. You too. All right, next up we have Cecil, Intertribal Council. Hi there.
Okay, here we go. All right, I was trying to unmute myself and I don't know how to can you hear me now? No?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, so this is Charlie Toledo. I'm with the director of SUSCL, Intertribal Council. We're based in Napa County since 1972, and that was around the same time I moved to Napa County from Orange County, but I'm native to New Mexico. I'm a descendant of the Towa people. Here with the Intertribal Council, helping people to understand, you know, the overt racism that exists in this community. It's mostly based on ignorance. You know, there isn't the story of the mass genocides that occurred here in the 1800s. There's no recognition of it. I want to commend Mayor Ellsworth for inviting me to make sure I was here on this listening session. And then also Representative Naga, who invited us to her community. There I am. to do our presentation. We worked 20 years to get kind of visibility and funding to create a history and the format to tell people the story of what occurred here in 10,000-year population. And I'm speaking specific to Napa County, that right now, Native Americans are only spoken about in the past tense. It's really hard to get published work in magazines or any books. The curriculum in all of the schools throughout Napa County omit the history of what occurred here in real terms, that a population of over 40,000 people that lived here for 10,000 years were nearly wiped out, listed now by the federal government as exterminated. And then the word WAPO isn't a real word, it's a made up word. That's the English invaders converted that. They were hearing guapo from the Spanish Euro invaders that came first, and then the ethnographers came and they were calling the tribes guapo, meaning handsome. And then the English ethnographers followed them and they heard WAPO. So they went around, I think it was as late as 1950, asking any of the survivors of those genocides, were they WAPO? And of course the answer was no. So at that point then the federal government listed the local tribes as exterminated. Those are federal terms of the federal government.
Wow.
I want to thank Reverend Zuniga for inviting us to present our fourth cohort that Mental Health Services was sponsoring and funded us to create the curriculum to draw from Native American elders of this region. There are descendants, the people from this valley, Onisati from the valley floor. The way north part, there was a little bit of Pomo incursion, and the southern part of Napa was the Putwin, and then to the southwest was the Miwok with the territory, and all of California was fully inhabited. Every square inch of California was touched and tended by human hands. The Episcopalian Church invited me 2 weeks ago to do a further study from the 5 cohort workshops that we're producing and have been producing. So we're in our 3rd year now, and we've reached about, I think this next cohort starting in January will be the 6th cohort. We're also starting to reach out to the tribes. Napa is in a 50 to 100 mile radius of over 21 federally recognized land-based tribes. One of the things that I've worked for, I'm the director, but I've also worked locally, globally, regionally on human rights for Indigenous people, women and children, consultative status with the UN, the United Nations. When I first started to be the director in 1998, we reorganized SESCL. And the violence here, the overt systemic racism was so severe, my life was threatened. I outreached to Amnesty International for support, and they came to study the situation, decided it was too dangerous and I should stop what I was doing. And I realized I wasn't going to stop because nobody else was doing what we and the organization was doing. But we did reach out at that point to the United Nations because we needed the support of an international agency to oversee the overt systemic racism of the Native and Indigenous population, specifically in the state of California, specifically in Napa County. The absence of any accurate curriculum or verbiage is that clearest line to the systemic racism. One of the things St. Helena did do that was a success, and we were a part of that in 1993, I think it was, Napa College was being built and remains were found. And the current president, at that time, the college president at the Upper Valley campus there in St. Helena, asked us to help create a dedication to the first people. Because the language in 1990, whatever it was, 1994, 95, was still so overt, we kind of put it in generalized terms of the first people. And that was the first visual, physical statement to that this place was an inhabited place that wasn't settled, it was invaded. And the residents were murdered, they were killed, the women, men, and children. And not only the people were killed, but the memory of the people was wiped out. That's what shows how deep that is, how deep, I don't know what to call it. It's hard to put a word to that. But WAPO is not a tribe, it's not a people, it's not even anything. And so that's your overt is right there with the park that's right adjacent to the Up Valley campus. So I was speaking with Mayor Ellsworth, and I want to thank him for attending our cohort workshops and getting a baseline. I always warn him, I said, don't start into solutions until you understand the problem. The problem of these omissions that I'm discussing is so deeply seated, and that every attempt of indigenous people or tribes to reassert themselves in Napa County, Napa Valley is the oldest inhabited place, oldest continuously inhabited place in North America. The fact that the people that tended this land for thousands and thousands of years.
30 seconds, Charlie.
Okay, so I'll stop there. I think that's good. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. That was, thank you for that crash course and sharing all the wisdom, knowledge, and history, and really pointing out the ways in which the discrimination, the systemic discrimination, one highlighting on Native American people, and the ways in which your history has not been published or shared, or it's left out of the curriculum. This omission, like you're saying, is like, now we don't get to know that or learn that or even own that, and demystifying the term WAPO. And like I can imagine, there's over 40 people on this call that now we have this knowledge that we can know better the next time we come across this term, and sharing all of the ways in which the lack of representation, the omission of history has reinforced racism and this invisibility. And thank you for taking the time to educate us today and sharing this and all of the work that you have done, even putting your own health and life in danger to continue advocating and helping make people more aware.
Okay, and I want to thank Mayor Ellsworth again for really taking time today and yesterday to reach out to make sure that I was here and had the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. And next up we have Julio. Hi, Julio, welcome.
Thank you. Let me just set this up. So my name is Julio Holguin. I'm born and raised in St. Helena. What I'd like to just share, I guess, is my own personal story of growing up here in St. Helena and everything that I've experienced. So I'm a first generation Mexican American. My parents came here as immigrants in the 70s, and my family extends back to the 50s. Also worked here in the Valley. In the vineyards, doing grafting, so for a lot of the early wineries when here in the wine country. And so my upbringing here in St. Helena has been definitely something that I'm very prideful about where we come from, St. Helena, and I love the upbringing that I had as a child. For sure, I mean, I think growing up, just seeing what my parents had to go through and myself, there's been instances of racial biases, microaggressions, whatever you want to call them. I mean, numerous, to the point where it's something that you just kind of get used to. Really, this whole experience with the city kind of opening up this conversation. It's part of my journey, I think, as myself, because as a Mexican American, it took me a long time to come to grips with this, but it's a lot of an identity crisis. My parents are Mexican. I was born in the United States, so I look Mexican. But so when I go to Mexico, people they know they call us pochos, that we're not real Mexicans. But growing up here in at the time was predominantly white. Going through that as well, looking different, and then obviously kind of always growing up having kind of inner working from both worlds. So having access to Mexican culture and family within my own group, and having friends that only speak Spanish, and then having only white friends, and so kind of going through all that. So long story short, I mean, this has taken me almost 35 years. I'm 40 now. It took me 35 years to really realize that I was bilingual, and in a sense that I was special, because I feel like a lot of the work that I do here now, I moved back to St. Helena after I moved for a few years when in my mid-20s. Part of the work was just getting involved in the community. So like I said, I was born and raised here. I became a nonprofit director. I began coaching, soccer and basketball as my kids were going, were able to do sports and activities, I tried to get more involved. Now I'm a school board trustee. And so part of that process has been understanding that and knowing, and now even more so with this meetings and everything that's happening in our country with around racism. It's taken me to this point, and just really understanding how challenging it is, even to me right now, to just talk about race, to open up and talk about certain things within the areas that I navigate in. So now I'm in meetings with, quote unquote power, where in the school board or committees or city meetings and things of this nature, and sometimes being really the only person of color or representation there, it can be somewhat pressure, because you feel like you have to represent everyone else. And so that's been hard. And just realizing that, and just understanding, not realizing that and embracing it, and being able to kind of work through that has been part of a process. So I do appreciate that I've had the opportunity, and I knew that this has been in my mind for like the last probably year or 2 years, about how I could get more involved through the school board and just through the city and around this issue, and wanting to kind of make a difference. And it's always just been like, okay, well, it's not coming up, so you don't have to worry about it. But now that it's really kind of here in forefront, I know that there's a lot of ways that we can work together and make some of these changes. So I'm really happy and encouraged that, that we'll be having more of these conversations. A lot of this is just, has taken me full circle just with my own kids. Like I said, we were raised and afforded a certain opportunity to follow our education. So I feel like the best thing that I can do for like my parents to honor them is to speak up, which has been really challenging for me, because finding my voice and speaking my truth has been really challenging. So like I said, this has been something that has taken me a while to get to, but I'm happy that I'm here. A part of the school board and work that I want to do within the school board and just with the city is just, I jotted a couple of things that I just feel like we need to look at, is just the representation, giving opportunity and equal opportunity, not just to housing, services, just any opportunity within the city, but also too within leadership, like teaching kids, I'm trying to teach my kids to speak up and to be vocal leaders. And that's something that, like I said, we weren't really taught as kids. So it's something that we've had to learn. And so now that's something that we're passing on. So kind of harnessing those kids, to learn about civic engagement and how to get involved is important. Providing safe spaces for kids, especially for the kids. I think the focus for me is on not just my kids, but kids in the community to really understand cultural differences and just understand how to work together and respect each other. I think that's really kind of the area that I think is going to be the kids that'll make the change to better, not just St. Helena, but the world. Obviously systemic changes, within our own district, within the curriculum, ways that we can, increase and recognize, history, things that have happened. And I think that's a big part of it, is just, people validating that these things happen is an important step. And also within city policies, things that we can do there. And really, just like I said, speaking the truth, that's really something that's been challenging for me to do. And it's something that I feel like it's part of my growth to not be quiet and not say things because you're worried about what people in the room are going to say or think. And then just really teaching empathy. I think that Paul mentioned this earlier, just teaching our kids empathy. I think that's something that we, as parents, as a school district, as a community, if we're setting the example, we're going to be teaching our kids, and they're going to be able to put that into fruition. So I think really the more that we learn about other cultures, it's kind of the more also an opportunity to learn more about yourself, which is something that I'm finding through these conversations, is just really exploring and kind of reflecting on not just my upbringing, but what my kids, what their upbringing's like, and kind of trying to put all that together. So as far as the city, I think obviously Mayor Ellsworth and just everyone, Preya, I think she did an excellent job with that small group discussion. It was something that's just helped me get to this point in my journey, and just it's really allowed me to kind of open up and share things that I thought were kind of past and done, and just really to open up and and find ways to be part of the solution. Because I do think that this community has been, I mean, there's a divide culturally. I mean, it's not, I don't think that's anything bad, but it's just something that's existed culturally and social, economically, and that's just the way it's been. But I think just the city, and within the district, if we can create these opportunities to kind of bring these communities together, because I feel like we do coexist. I just think it's a good opportunity and a good stepping stone. So like I said, I'm really happy to be part of this work, and I just want to make sure that we do something that is going to be lasting and something that my kids and other kids in this community can look at back later on and say like, wow, this work was challenging, it was hard, but it was done, and now like we have a better St. Helena. So like I said, I love St. Helena, and I want to raise my kids here and be here, and so I want to put the work in to make it better. So thank you.
Thank you, Julio. Thank you for sharing and for your bravery to come on to share today too, and sharing your personal story. Being first generation, like being Mexican and also being American and being born and raised in the United States, it's almost like you don't quite belong in either of those. Like here you're Mexican and they see you on the outside, but then going to Mexico, they know that you're not native to Mexico, and that kind of reconciling, it sounds like, has been a really deep and personal journey and process over these past few years to really look at, your identity and who you are and how both cultures have informed the person that you are and the huge weight and responsibility that you hold, seeing the need and how important it is for you to represent, and that it's not easy. Like it's not easy to be up there and, kind of like what Paul was saying earlier, like, do I belong? Am I worthy to be in this position of power, to be making decisions, and then also knowing you are, but that comes at a different starting point, right? I think like when you have other challenges in your life or being, first generation American, it's not like you have that automatic, like, I belong here and I'm entitled to have an opinion. Like you almost question yourself, and it's like a different barrier you have to overcome. But I was hearing all of your suggestions around, diversifying the school board and really empowering students to own themselves, love themselves, advocate, be a part of civic engagement, naming and validating ways in which racism has been practiced and is structural, and also looking to the city to really continue this work, and that your hope is really that for your kids, that they can see years from now, like this was a totally different experience that you had or that your parents had, and it's a better St. Helena. So thank you for sharing your story with us today. Thank you, Julio. And next we have Joe. Welcome, Joe.
Hello, everyone. There we go. I'll speak very briefly. First, I'd like to thank the city and Tiffany, you for being here and facilitating this conversation. In terms of my relationship, I was born in St. Helena. I am a current senior at St. Helena High School and a former student of Mr. McLean. And one of the things that Mr. McLean taught us in his class was to be aware of the danger of only becoming familiar with a single story. And I think in our tiny town and our little bubble of St. Helena, it's very easy to become comfortable with our single story. So I'd just like to encourage the city to be aware of just how easy it is to slip into an everyday routine, looking at equity, looking at inclusion and diversity, and especially as we face the challenges with COVID-19 and doing all of this work virtually, that the city continue to bolster community partnerships. I know that the library has been talked about a lot, Julio talking about connecting with the schools and really creating an atmosphere where everyone, regardless of their background, whether there be, what language they are most familiar with, their gender expression, their gender identity, their age, their race, their ethnicity, their religion, that we create a safe environment. So again, I want to thank the city for that, but then also, and I know that this work is already in process, but creating spaces for youth to meet with city leaders, to meet with each other, to have conversations like this, because it's difficult. And it's difficult for me to come up and speak. It's difficult for my peers to come up and speak. And just so creating these much more intimate environments to talk about race, which can be really scary. And not just race, but whatever it may be, it's really scary to sit in, whether it be a screen with adults or just in a room with adults, and be able to talk about these really personal and deeply rooted ideas. So while I thank the city for doing this work here tonight, and I know that this work is already in process, but really be aware of what steps need to be taken to create those intimate environments with students, and not only students, but those who don't feel as comfortable coming to these meetings and talking in front of everyone. And then to round everything out, I just wanted to really highlight the importance of visibility. I came out as gay in, I want to say, middle school. And these past few years, to be able to walk down Main Street and to see the pride flag being flown at City Hall, to be seeing flown at the district office for the St. Helena Unified School District, that's empowering. And to see your community support you and support people who are different, people who don't really fit the mold, is empowering. And so I want to commend the city for that action and really just highlight the importance of diversity. So thank you. And also to the gentleman's point earlier, Officer Ramon, I definitely remember his impact in our community. I remember seeing his face zooming around in his little patrol car, giving out stickers left and right. So thank you everyone for being here, and thank you for taking the time to listen to what I have to say. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you for having the courage to come up here and really advocating for youth and student voices to be a part of these conversations, and for challenging the city to think about how do we make it a safer and braver space for youth, knowing that sharing like this in a public space is hard already. Publicly to speak, but then to talk personally about yourself and who you are and the struggles that you've had and coming out with your own identities, like that's even harder. It's such a personal journey. And for your recognition of representation matters. So for the city to continue displaying its active allyship, support, for you to share as a gay man or youth and what that has felt like, the validation that you received in seeing the flags being shown around City Hall or the district office, that gives us tangible things to work with, to know things that we can do to show visibly that we embrace and we want people to express who they are and all of their identities. And it sounds like we need to figure out what happened to Officer Ramon and where he's at, because it sounds like he's one of our hometown heroes. So thank you, Joe. And next we have Amelia, and then there are no hands raised after that. So if anybody is considering sharing or speaking up, please feel free to raise your hand at this point. We want to hear from you.
Hi, it's great to be here with you all. I'm a former resident of St. Helena. I grew up there and voted in the recent election from LA, which is where I live now. And one thing that I think we could do better as a community is to combine our policy discussions and decisions of economy and race. What I noticed during the last election was that these were treated as separate issues when the reality is that they're intersectional. And in particular, I noticed that when there's been discourse about tourism, the pro-tourism conversations have maybe not highlighted as much as they could the fact that these industries, which are so profitable and which create so much of the wealth and high property value in our community, are profiting off the labor of people of color and can be particularly exploitative toward women of color. And then on the other hand of that, when we're talking about policies that oppose tourism and the reason for opposition is the many things that can be unpleasant about having things be crowded or having so many of our local businesses cater to people from out of town. That discussion leaves out the fact that increasing sources of funding in our community would enable us to fund more of these programs that promote racial equity, like housing or having more translators or increased educational services. Oh, I can't hear you, Tiffany. I think you're muted.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Amelia. Had to happen at least once in a day. So it sounds like, well, yeah, that you are a recent or former resident of St. Helena and that you have still continue to your engagement with the city, even as you live in SoCal now. And that to highlight that some of these topics or issues can't be talked about in isolation or separated because they are very intertwined, like thinking about race and the economy, and really urging the city to consider where or how it's focusing its conversations and its efforts, because when we focus on tourism or trying to appeal to outside communities, and where we focus that time, money, and attention can be taken away from things that actually do promote equity. So really encouraging the city to have an equity lens to consider its decision-making processes. Thank you, Amelia. All right. So it doesn't look like any hands are up. So please, if you're considering, should I speak or should I not? Please do. You can click the raise hand button on your Zoom screen. There's no right or wrong answers. Anything that you feel is true for you, or even any responses or reactions to what has been shared so far. And we have R. Myers. And after that, Alicia. Hi there.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can hear me. Okay, great. Thank you so much. I'm so happy that you are having this forum, and there have been some really wonderful points that have been raised. I don't have new points, but I just wanted to echo some of the things that have been said.
You're not share your name with us?
I'm sorry?
Oh, will you also share your name and your relationship to the city?
Oh, of course. This is Beth Myers. I've lived here for 29 years. I'm a former music teacher, retired now. My children both went through the St. Helena school system here. And my husband's the local pediatrician, so we're well connected. I wanted to thank Mayor Ellsworth for making that special effort to make sure that Charlie Toledo was included in this discussion. And to echo what the very eloquent young man said a moment ago about the lesson he learned from Malcolm McLean, to be aware of telling one story and to be leery, I should say, of telling only one story. Napa Valley certainly has many, many stories here to be told. And I'm wondering how we manage to tell those painful stories, the ones that Charlie mentioned of invasion and the Chinese exploitation of the workers who, really built a lot of the caves and wineries here. I think we have an excellent opportunity coming up. A couple weeks ago in the St. Helena Star, I was pleased to see that on the front page, it says the Heritage Society is gearing up to remodel their location and their displays and to tell St. Helena's story. And I would just really encourage the council to reach out to them and perhaps involve Charlie particularly in making sure that the Native American presence, that the story that they have to tell is told accurately and prominently. I was a little distressed in the article to read that in putting together these displays, the first thing that the visitors will see is a large map of the rancheros. And that's the first thing they will see as they come into the museum. And I hope that we might take a strong look at that, because in fact, that is not where the history of Napa Valley began. So I just would encourage you to reach out to those who know very much more than I do about this subject, but we've got some wonderful experts here that can help with that. And I applaud and echo the idea of recognizing the Chinese population. I don't know if a plaque is accurate, but I would really like to see the Heritage Society that's about to redo all of their exhibits and, you know, really proclaim the history of this valley. I hope that it can be done very accurately and inclusively and honestly. And it is painful. I don't know how those stories get told on a large basis, but that's important to me.
Thank you, Beth. I know you just said you don't know how these honest and painful stories are shared, but I think you already mentioned a few of these ideas, like in the paper, also in some of the exhibits and maps. I mean, the city has a lot of agency in terms of what is being presented publicly and the history that is told, and maybe that is perhaps a research project for the city council to look at what are the different platforms or avenues that do exist for the city to share its history and maybe rewrite it or write it in the right way, and using and calling upon some of the experts that we have to emphasize the Native American genocide, the Chinese workers who helped to build some of the history here. Yeah, and thank you for echoing all of the comments that have been said previously. Thank you, Beth. And then next, I saw Alicia Summer. I saw your hand go up, but then it went down. So will you wait? There it goes. Okay, we'll call in Alicia. And then after that is, I see Ana Carolina, which is, I think, Luis again.
Hi, all. Hi. It's not Alicia, it's Michael. As Lisa mentioned earlier, we've been here for about 4 months. We had to evacuate for about half of it, but we came to this community. We made a decision 5 years ago about community and how important it is and what it relates to us and our family. This is a great example of why we came here. I really appreciate everybody's voices that have been here and everyone's listening. I am a white, middle-aged, Anglo-Saxon, it's white, I guess, husband, married, whatever. And I like the fact that people that look like me are asking a lot of questions. I like the fact that there's people on this board or that are on this panel that don't look like me or bringing up some other things. This is a very tiny little city. You all, or we all, are about 7,000 people. And the fact that you're doing this much, we are doing this much to try and find and make it right means a lot to us. And I like where this is going. But as a lot of people have mentioned, there has to be action, not words. So, you know, as we as a community, as we try and integrate with the community and make sure that we're supporting the community, I just want to reiterate other things that people have said, that yes, we're trying to do a lot of things. We're talking about doing a lot of things, but it's important that we follow through and that we support each other as a community. And again, I just want to say thank you very much. Thanks for welcoming us into your community. And thanks for having this forum. That's all.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Alicia, for coming back on to share, to acknowledge and appreciate the work that is being done and the conversation, for you being a white middle-aged man, and to see that reflected on this council, but then also having people who look like you be asking these questions and sharing about themselves, and that this also has to be followed up with action, or else it doesn't go anywhere. I know part of that is trying to understand what the issues are, what the stories are, what the experiences are, because I think, like Charlie mentioned earlier, we can't come up with solutions until we understand the problem. And I think that's starting to come out, but that reminder of we still have to take small steps, because the change doesn't happen overnight. It happens by these intentional steps that we take, these changes, and then over time, as we build this lens, it amounts to something. But thank you for that call to action. It's needed along the way. Thank you, Michael. And thank you, Alicia. And next we will call back Anna Carolina, AKA, I believe that is Luis. All right, we'll just wait for the Zoom to transition over. Sometimes that takes a minute, but there you are. Hey, Luis. Oh, can you go ahead and unmute?
Oh, can you hear me now? I was on mute. Okay, just a little quick history about early Napa Valley history. Not a whole long, but we're talking early 1800s. 1828, George John arrived here in Northern California. The town of Yountville is named after him. He was a hunter trapper. He came from via North Carolina, Kentucky, moved his way west. He ended up in the Sonoma area over the Mayacamas from us. And he was there, and he started working for General Mariano Vallejo, who was a commanding general of the Mexican army at the time. The city of Vallejo, California is named after him. The city of Benicia is named after his wife. So he started working for him. They became very close. In 1833, he received what is known as the Camas Land Grant, Rancho Camas Land Grant, which is most of Napa Valley today. He established himself on the eastern side of the hill of Yountville, which is the hill that you'll see if you drive between St. Helena and Napa, right before Yountville. It's on your left-hand side if you're driving south. And he received that land grant, and he established himself there. Right there, that's where he started his thing here in Napa Valley. You mentioned the Wapo Indians earlier. The reason they're named WAPO, W-A-P-P-O, is because at the time, this was Mexico, and the Mexicans here at the time called the local indigenous people guapo, G-U-A-P-O. Guapo means handsome and brave. If you translate that into Spanish, it means handsome and brave. English-speaking people came here. They said, "Who are these?" They're the Guapos. So Guapo became Wapo. That's why we call the Indians here Wapo. George Yount did this thing here in Napa, and he was one of the first people of European descent, English speaking, to establish him here in Napa. And he planted the first grapevines here in Napa, 1839, and so on. So that's how all Napa became, because of earlier you were talking about the history of Napa. So that's how the colonization of this area happened. Before that, it was purely 100% indigenous, Native American, First Nation, I don't know how you call it. That's what Napa was up until the 1830s. I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
That was so valuable. Thank you, Luis, for coming back and sharing that history and reiterating where the term Wapo came from, Guapo, and where the colonization happened back in 1828, and the wine industry started from this one person. Thank you. Yeah. All right, everybody. So it doesn't look like there's any more hands, but just in case you forgot or you're considering sharing, again, the questions that we're asking tonight are stories of times you have witnessed or experienced discrimination or bias in the city of St. Helena. What is working in regards to the city's efforts to be more inclusive, to address and dismantle interpersonal or structural discrimination. And last, what more can the city do to be more inclusive and address bias and discrimination? Anna.
Hi, can I say something? Because I had a friend that was on and she couldn't stay on for the whole meeting, but she sent me a suggestion.
Sure.
Mark, to read it for her, she sent me a text so I can read it.
Yes.
Okay, great. So her name is Molly Hill, and she has 2 kids in the school system. And she said for her 2 cents, she would love to see participation in sports in St. Helena reflect actual diversity. Sports for all, and they get much more diversity. You can really see a big difference. She's happy to volunteer to help change that in the future when we can have sports again, of course. And she thinks it's so wonderful that we're having this meeting.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you, Molly. So it sounds like more diversity in sports. And would that be the students on the sports teams or the actual sports that are being offered in terms of programs?
It's the actual students on the sports teams. And I think it goes back perhaps to Ms. Hardy's comment when she talked about how sometimes when you have in a city more economic opportunity, you can then afford to pay, they can make the sports free for everybody. So that it's not a barrier for anybody to attend. So I'm not sure about that link. I'm just putting it together right now in my head. That might be something. But she just mentioned that the sports there are free and she sees more diversity on the teams.
Thank you so much. Absolutely. There probably are different ties in making sports more accessible, or at least trying to identify what are the barriers to diversity on sports teams.
Because it's not just the fees. When I think about it, having 2 kids, it's also a lot to get them shoes and to get them the right gear and everything that goes with it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. How to transportation.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Great, thank you. All right, and then now we have Anna and Napa Green. Hi there.
Hi guys.
So this conversation has made me more emotional than expected. So it was hard to raise my hand. But I am the executive director of Napa Green. I didn't know Zoom announced that, so nice. And I'm actually from St. Helena originally. I graduated from St. Helena High in 2000. And definitely when I went to high school there was a definite divide in high school between the Hispanic and Latinx community and the white community. And I had an interesting sort of bridge in that my mother and I were one of the only white families in low-income housing and one of the few low-income housing communities in St. Helena. Sorry, but I thought it was important to talk and just share what we are up to. We have a really, really rigorous Napa Green Winery sustainability certification, but we're working on completely revamping our Napa Green Vineyard sustainability certification, and to really focus on climate action and regenerative agriculture, but also on social equity and justice. And I think in terms of sustainable wine growing, social equity gets sort of a nod, but doesn't get as much emphasis as the environmental and economic pieces. And so we're trying to really draw those in to our new certification program and really emphasize truly how inextricable and how important social equity and justice is to overall sustainability. And so we have just formed a Napa Green Social Equity Working Group, and I really want to thank Preya that she is actually on that working group, and we're going to have our first meeting in 2 weeks. So I just want to let the community know that when you see those Napa Green certified signs, there's a lot going on behind that. And if you're ever wondering, more about what that means, please do reach out anytime. And thank you for handling me being a little emotional.
Not at all. Thank you, Anna, for just being brave enough to come on and for sharing what the work around social equity that Napa Green is doing and all of its efforts in emphasizing sustainability, but also social equity as part of that work. Because there are a lot of intersections, and just sharing your experience also as being a resident growing up in St. Helena and being in low-income housing and being the minority white family there, because I'm sure that comes with different experiences as well, and the perspectives that you're sharing from those experiences. Thank you. All right, so I think in a moment I will go ahead and hand it over to Mayor Ellsworth for our closing this evening. To share a little bit about some of the just next steps and what will be happening next. So Mayor Ellsworth, and then also City Manager Mark Prestwich, if you want to chime into that too.
Thank you, Tiffany. And I'll pass this over to Mr. Prestwich in just a moment. First, what I want to say is I want to say thank you to our City Council and our staff for the focus and the will to continue this work. I want to recognize something that Vice Mayor Doring helped me understand. While we speak that we may feel that we are not racist, personally, if we feel that way, we also must recognize that we have benefited from racism that has been systemic in this country, in our state, in our region, and that in recognizing those benefits is where we start to understand the sort of dismantling that we talk about and begin this work. And so the other thing I'm going to say in terms of bravery, the folks who are speaking here, it takes an incredible amount of bravery. I have been the mayor of this town for the previous 2 years. I speak publicly almost every week. On the council for 4 years, speaking almost every week. Before that, as a citizen, active citizen, speaking at public meetings. I've been a performer before that for 20 years, performing publicly. It's very difficult for me to navigate this conversation without breaking into tears, without moving into a very emotional space. This is a challenging conversation on every level. And so the willingness of our community to participate, the willingness of our council to open this door, the willingness of our staff to stay engaged, to to bring it to this level of fruition, and it will continue, is remarkable. So if we can give each other the courage, if we can give each other the bravery, if those who speak up can help others speak up, know that you're not alone in the challenge to open your mouth and speak on these issues. Just know that you're not alone. We're all facing this, including those of us who speak publicly quite often. I just want to recognize that. And then I want to ask Mr. Presswich if he has a moment to go through some of the sort of next steps we're looking at, where this meeting, as we say, we're trying to really clearly identify the problems to start looking at solutions. And so we have some next steps, and our city manager, Mark Presswich, will help us sort of understand where we're working towards with that.
Thank you, Mayor Ellsworth, and I want to echo your comments as well. It's I'm so grateful for all of the people that attended today, that took the time to tell their story, and I am also very grateful for our staff, in particular Priya Nixon, the assistant to the city manager, who's worked tirelessly to help advance a constructive conversation that will not only be a moment in time, but a lasting influence on the town. And we understand that this is a journey. This is just the beginning of that. Part of our objective arriving to today was making sure that we could create an environment for this conversation in a helpful way. And part of preparing for that was also finding the right assistance in facilitation and talent. And I also want to thank and I'm grateful for the outstanding work of Tiffany Hong, because Tiffany really facilitated a terrific meeting tonight. And we're so grateful for your leadership, and we're thankful. The mayor asked about next steps, and the council on October 22nd adopted the resolution that the mayor referred to at the beginning of the meeting. And that resolution was really a call to action. And included in that resolution was a request that the city manager seek and obtain on a regular basis input from the public to identify potential areas of discrimination and systemic racism that may exist within the city government. Part of our focus is going to be internal within the organization, and we have work to do. Of course, another part of our opportunity was to create an opportunity for our community to tell their story. And we're going to take the comments and the great ideas and feedback that we received tonight. We're going to synthesize it with some of the initial concepts that we had, but we knew we wanted to listen first. And when that work is synthesized, and I forecast that we'll be looking at probably early 2021, we'll bring forward a subsequent conversation with the council to help prioritize the ideas, receive additional feedback, and begin to build a work plan that advances progress on a number of fronts. So I'm happy to answer any additional questions that the council has. And again, thank you very much for a very important conversation tonight.
Thank you. Tiffany, what my thoughts were to see if there were any additional comments from council before I do some brief closing remarks. What do you think of that?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Are there any comments at this point in the meeting from our council members? I'm seeing Ms. Chateau.
Yeah, I'll speak, and hopefully I can speak. My internet's been really unstable and kicking me off, so I apologize for that. But I just wanted to say, just echo how much I appreciate this conversation. It's different than any other conversation I've had since being on city council, to listen to all of these voices. It's just different. And so I'm really grateful that we had all of you that came on tonight and spoke and cried, the tears. I mean, I felt that differently. It made me think about what you were saying differently. And I'm just really grateful to know that all of you are out there in our community, and that we're in this together, and that we can make it better. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Knudsen?
Yeah, I was happy to see all the school board folks. Well, there were principals, there were teachers, and there was just a strong representative from the school board members from the school district. And one of the things that I've felt for as long as I've lived here is that the town government and the school district don't cooperate all that often. And I'm hoping that this will be an opportunity because, nothing, of course, is more important than our children and our kids, and the school district is dedicated to, doing the best for them. And we've had our challenges this year, certainly with COVID. And I just hope that we can communicate and work more closely. In fact, I'd like to advocate for a joint school district and city council meeting. Perhaps it's more informal, but I just think there's so many common places that we could work together. I'd like to see. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Toe?
I just wanted to share some information because I did have the high school principal reach out to me before this meeting and want to work with us, and also the school board member and their student rep, Joe, who spoke so eloquently tonight. He also was in communication to other students, and also a school board member shared our flyer online and really wanted to attend tonight and couldn't. I know they are committed and they want to work with us. And it was such an amazing meeting to see how committed our schools are, what they already are actually doing, and how much more they want to be doing, and with us.
Thank you. Thank you for relaying that. Are there any other comments from council at this point? Seeing none. Okay, I'm going to move into some closing remarks. I just want to first of all, I want to say thank you to the Latinx, to the Mexican members of our community who spoke up this evening, who this part of our community have been key to the success of this region. It's a long-time community partnership, and there are imbalances that need to be examined and acted upon. And so there's great appreciation for you being here and speaking. And as we start moving into how we work through these issues, I just want to say that that's very much appreciated. I want to say to the young family who was on, Alicia and Michael, your families like yours are the families we need here to raise your children here, to be the next generation of this town. As I said, I grew up here. I feel like the luckiest person in the world because I grew up feeling safe and protected, and that I could do anything in the world because of the strength that was imparted to me by being part of a community like this. So we're so happy you're here, and come introduce yourself, or we'll get together and find a way to make sure you meet the folks you need to meet in terms of knowing our police department and our wonderful city administration and staff and this whole community. So just want to say welcome, and we're so thrilled that you're raising your children here and you chose a town, this town. And so also, I just want to mention that as we talk about, I want to say thank you to the folks from First Five and Rainbow Action Network who are here, and they helped put forward that resolution on systemic racism as a public health crisis in Napa, the city of Napa. And that moving forward there gave us some of the tools to move it forward here. So that initial work that was done by those groups, First Five and Rainbow Action Network, were really critical. And I want to say thank you to Napa Green for being here. It's this partnership of our city, our businesses, our community, all working together and holding each other to the necessary standards to do this together, because we have to all do it together. So I want to put those thanks out there. I want to recognize that these issues are intersectional. As we talk about race, it ties into our economic conversations. It ties into our climate conversations about how impacts are felt in different aspects of our community. So they all do tie together. I want to recognize that, and I want to just simply, again, thank you, everybody, for the bravery of coming out and speaking. I want to say thank you to Charlie Toledo for being on and helping bring that education forward. In 2019, the governor of California issued an apology for the genocide related to the indigenous people. That's the beginning step of beginning to recognize this history. And when we talk about it and we make the history, we talk about the real history, we can get into the real healing, but we have to get to the real history to get to that healing. And then also the participation of the public schools for being here and wanting to engage and wanting to build a bridge through these types of meetings. Working together will be wonderful. And I want to thank you for putting that information, letting us know that, so that we know it's an open door to building a dialogue. And so with that, and then I want to thank Tiffany from Circle Up. It's just remarkable to have you here and have your expertise in navigating and helping guide us through this. So with that, I'm going to look just to make one last thank you to our city manager, Mark Presswich, and our assistant to the city manager, Priya Nixon, and the work that you've done to bring this to this point, which is a beginning point. Your focus will be remembered here. It is a remarkable step. And so thank you. And with that, I'm gonna adjourn our meeting, say thank you to everybody. We're gonna have to work together on these issues. We're gonna have to work together through our current situation as we go through these COVID issues. But together we'll get through this and we'll get to better spots. So thank you. And we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Mayor Ellsworth, and thank you everybody for sharing this evening and being a part of it. It was an honor to be able to help and guide this conversation today. If you have any other stories or experiences that you want to share or you think of tomorrow or a week from now, please feel free to send them to Priya. I sent a chat out to all participants with Priya's email. And also, if you want to provide your feedback of tonight's session, I also included a link of our short evaluation form. But I couldn't have summed it up better. Thank you, Mayor Ellsworth, all the city council members, Mark and Priya. This has been an amazing night. I myself have learned so much. And so I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful evening and look forward to supporting with next steps.
Thank you. And I do want to say thank you to our Spanish interpreters too. So
absolutely,
this is all helping become more well-rounded. So thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.